Howdy folks, welcome back to Doing Brew. On today's video, I'm going to show you how to apply a stone facing around a fireplace. In my case, it's a three-sided peninsula fireplace, so I have to put stone on three sides. If you're going to be applying stone to a traditional fireplace surround, your job's going to be a whole lot easier. This video is part of a three-part series that I put together that'll help you build an entire fireplace package. The three videos are this one, the stone surround, another video that shows you how to build a solid wood box mantle. I did mine out of cherry to match our kitchen cabinets. And then the third video is how to build a fireplace hearth, which I was really kind of intimidated by. I had never done that kind of a project before, but like most DIY home improvement projects, if you break it down to its pieces and parts, it's really not that hard to do. But please, let me ask you to stay tuned all the way through to the end, because I have 3 subscribers that have done their own stone projects and sent me the pictures, and they really did a super nice job, and I'm going to show those at the end of this video. Also at the end of this video are going to be the 2 links to the mantle project and the hearth project. Let's get to it.
Now the first thing I'm going to do is install some spacers above the fireplace because I don't want the stone to be directly in contact with the fireplace itself. Now obviously these are just paint stir sticks, but at 3/16 of an inch they'll provide the perfect spacing I'm looking for. Plus those little bits of red tape on there will make it easy to remove them after the stone's installed and set up. Next up, I'm going to install just some scrap wood here to ensure that I get a straight line and a way to support the stones while the thin set sets up. Now, this is all prep work to support the first course of stone, which will be 9 inches tall coming directly off the fireplace, up to this line here. There begins the mantle, which I'll build out of solid cherry, and there's another video on that for you to watch. Then begins the final course of stone that comes off the mantle all the way up to the ceiling. And here's just a reference line for the lower extent of the TV, which I'll be mounting in the center of the stonework. Now, the first step in prepping your stone is to lay out your stone and vacuum it real well. A lot of dust and small stone particles on the stone that you don't want to seal into the stone. Next up, you want to seal your stone. Always easier to seal it up before you do the install, and I'll seal it using a good quality sealer and a matte finish. 2 coats prior to install and 1 coat following. Next up, I'll be mixing up the thin set. Now I chose Megalite because I don't want a whole lot of weight hanging above my fireplace. I'll want to limit that as much as possible. And this Megalite thin set is specifically designed for stone and for a large format tile or stone of 15 inches or greater, which is exactly what I need. Now I'm going to mix up my thin set in a box just to try and keep the mess to a minimum, and then I'm going to mix it up with a paint stirrer because I don't want to break out my big mixer. And you want to mix it up kind of to a consistency that will just kind of cling to the stick, but not too heavy and thick. And here I'm back buttering the first stone panel and installing it on top of the fireplace and that spacer stick I installed, as well as the block that comes level off of the fireplace and the spacer stick. Now here I'm ensuring that I'm aligned with the corner. Now what you want to do is get that alignment and then slide it, in this case to the left, about 1/16 of an inch to accommodate the tile that matches up to it on the other side of the corner. The second panel going in. Now as you can see, I've got a little bit of squeeze out of the thin set coming through the panel there, and you want to go ahead and clean that up as quickly as possible. You don't want that thin set to set up on your stone, and this is a great reason why we seal the stone prior to install. Makes cleanup real easy. Here I'm dry fitting the first 3 stones that I'll use to build my first corner. On the back side of those stones, I'll scribe a line with a Sharpie, and then on the tile saw, you'll want to cut to the outside of that line. Remember, you want to preserve about 1/16 of an inch overhang, and that will accommodate the thin set behind the stone on the other side of that corner. And these, of course, are just very simple straight cuts on the wet saw. I'll come in and dry off the stone prior to back buttering and then setting them in place. And we're about halfway done with our first corner. Later in the video, I'll show you how to separate these stones and prep the ends to have a nice natural looking corner. In doing my prep work for this stone install, I read the reviews on the stone panels and the pre-made corners online. And quite honestly, the reviews for the pre-made corners were not so great. A lot of gripes about them being not 90 degrees, either slightly over or slightly under, and making it difficult to get a true nice looking corner. More on the pre-made corners later in the video, plus I'll show you how to install them. Now here I'm installing the first stone panel on the short side of my peninsula fireplace. Back buttered, set into place, I'm going to slide the entire panel to the left so that one stone sticking out there extends beyond by about 1/16 of an inch, which allows me to set the stones coming around the corner just perfectly to make that nice pretty corner. Here you can see that I've got a stone with a nice natural edge to it and another one that goes above it. I'm going to set those in with the natural edge inside so I can just scribe a line for the cut. Now you want this line to be proud of the corner really by about 1/8 of an inch, because you want that natural edge to extend out and beyond the corner just slightly. Now it's also important to wash off your stone to get all that stone dust off once they come off the tile saw. Now I have all the stones dry fit here just to make sure everything fits together perfectly. I'll take those down, back butter them, and begin to install the stones. Now I'm working with about 7 or 8 stones here, but believe it or not, after you get everything cut and dry fit and looking beautiful, when you take them down to permanently install them, things can get a little bit jumbled up. Later in the video I'll show you a very simple trick on how to keep everything straight. With this corner complete, I'm going to move over to the right side of the short side of my peninsula fireplace and begin building out that corner. Now of course I'm doing it exactly the same way that I just did for the left corner. Now just to keep everybody up to date on where we are in the project, I am continuing to build the first course of stone around the entire perimeter of my fireplace. So that's 6 inches tall up from the fireplace, wrapped all the way around. And of course 6 inches is the overall height of my pre-made panels. Throughout this video and all Do and Brew videos, we're enjoying the music of Western blues singer-songwriter Jonathan Jones. There will be a link to Jonathan's music in the description, as well as Jonathan's YouTube channel. Check it out. And with the install of this final short panel, which was a very simple straight cut on the wet saw, I am complete with this side of my peninsula fireplace. I have the corresponding corner on the back side to finish out next. Next up, I'll be cutting the panels to 3 inches in height, which will give me an overall height of 9 inches, which is an important dimension for my project because at 9 inches above the fireplace is where I want my box mantle to be installed. So a relatively easy cut using the fence on my wet saw set at 3 inches to make a long rip cut, if it were a piece of wood, along my stone panel. And as always, you want to rinse off the stone panel real well to ensure you don't bring in any stone dust. And we'll follow the exact same process all the way around to install this final 3 inches before I begin working on my box mantle build and install.
Okay folks, with the installation of those 3 rows of stones, that brings me up to the level of where the mantle is going to be installed. So I'm going to take a break from stone installation for about a week or 10 days while I build and install the mantle. And I'm also going to do all the prep work for mounting a television right here above the mantle. Be sure and check out my box mantle video. It's not that hard to do, and I really like the way I built in the returns, which gives the illusion of a large beam built into the wall. There will be a link to this project at the end of this video. Alright, well hey, welcome back. So I've got the box mantles done on this side and the opposite side of our Peninsula fireplace. And I got our TV mount installed with the cable and power poles. Now, there's a whole lot more going on behind the scenes than just this TV mount. You have to be real careful because Wonderboard is a super good substrate for applying stone or tile, but it just doesn't have the strength to hold a mount and a TV and maybe some speakers or whatever else you might have on your television. It's just not strong enough to do that. So what I had to do was I cut a hole in the Wonderboard and went behind and completely reinforced that with stud lumber. So it's not going anywhere. The Wonderboard by itself just may not be strong enough to hold your television, so be real careful mounting to just Wonderboard. In fact, I don't recommend it. You've really got to have that stud lumber behind the wall supporting your mount and the television itself. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and take down my TV mount, but it was critical for me to know where those mounting screws go so I can work around that with my stonework. And then I'm going to start applying the stacked stone from the mantle on up. So for right now, let's go ahead, take this down and start stacking stone. Now the first course of stone above the mantle is probably the most visible stone of the whole project. So I don't want to have just a straight edge of the pre-built panel. So I removed all of the stones on the edge except one, and then I'll back butter and install this panel. Now this is only a technique and is completely optional, and quite honestly, it requires a fair amount of extra work. But I didn't want to have that straight line of the panel right at eye level above the mantle. And now installing nearly complete panels on my second course, I had to cut out a little around the electrical and network and cable boxes. Plus you can see there on the ends, I limited the runs of straight lines for a little more natural look. And you want to check for level after each row of panels is installed. If you're a little bit out one way or the other, you can shim the edges of the panels ever so slightly and make up that difference over the run of a couple of panels. Now I need to dry fit a panel and mark the locations for the cuts to go around the electrical and cable boxes, as well as to drill a hole to allow for my TV mount screw to come through the stone. Relatively easy using the electrical boxes as my reference point to mark the locations for my cuts and for the hole to allow the mount screw to come through the panel. And I'll be heading out to the wet saw in just a moment to make these cuts. Now, since the initial start of the video, I got a new saw. This is a rigid 7-inch wet saw, and this is a big improvement over my previous saw in that the table slides, which allows you to set the stone in place and then slide it through the saw blade, which allows for much more accurate cuts. I highly recommend this type of saw for cutting your stone panels or any kind of tile work you might have. Now after that cut, there's a slight burr in the corner. There's a little bit of excess material that I'll want to remove with a tile and stone file. Work it like a normal file and just wear away that material until you have a nice smooth corner.
Next up, I'll be drilling the hole for my TV mount screw. I'll be using a diamond edged hole saw in my drill, which makes pretty fast work of drilling this hole. And now a dry fit to make sure my cuts and my hole line up correctly. And everything looks good, nice and tight. I just make it in with that screw hole, but I'll back butter that panel, set it in place, and then I'm going to move out here pretty quickly to install the next few rows of panels using the same method to cut out for my mount screws. And a quick progress check. This is the living room side with the TV mount screws. This is the dining room side, which will have just a picture on the wall. Have that extra electrical outlet there for Christmas decorations and whatnot. Now here's the short side of my Peninsula fireplace, which I now need to get to work on. So I'm going to follow much the same process as before and begin with installing the larger panels, but trimming the stone to ensure I have nice neat corners. So I'm going to remove these two lower stones on the left side, as well as a few select stones on the right side to ensure I've got a nice natural looking corner. And after the removal of the stones, this is what I've got. On the left side I removed the two stones that I mentioned before, and on the right side I removed a number of stones. I left these two in place and removed the rest. This one I need to trim because it's split on me. And that's looking pretty nice. And here I'm dry fitting the second panel above. And I think what I'll do is I'll remove some of the stones on the right side of this panel, which will allow me to move it over and eliminate the straight edges on the left side that are too close to the corner. Okay, and that looks pretty good. Now for these three straight pieces here that come to the corner, I'm going to leave those proud by just about a 1/16 of an inch, and that'll allow me to bring some natural edges over to the corner to wrap around. And for these three pieces here, I'll simply put extensions over to the corner, make it look real nice. And I'll back butter those two pieces and set them in place. Okay, now that I've got those panels in place, it's time to fill in the gap between that lower panel around the mantle and below. Now, I just wanted you to see this process, but I sped up the video quite a bit here, just so it doesn't take up too much video time. And after a dry fit, I will back butter these and set them into place. Now there are a couple of stones missing there. Honestly, they just fell out as I was cutting the panels. I'll fill those in when I'm cutting the small pieces for the corner work.
Okay folks, so at this point it's time for me to start filling in around the corners. I only have about 10 or 12 pieces that I need to put in there, but believe me, I've cut 6 or 8 pieces before, got them into place perfectly, and then when it comes time to set them with a thin set, everything gets jumbled up. It is all about organization. So you can see I have my pieces numbered.
And those numbers correspond to their placement on the wall.
So it only takes a moment to write a number on the back, write a number on the wall, keeps you out of trouble. So let's go ahead and start putting these pieces on the wall.
And I'll back butter number 11 here and put it into place. As I've done before, I'm going to speed up the video here for a bit so I don't waste too much of your time while you see me put together another corner. But again, I do want you to see it so you know what the process looks like. All the stones in my panels are either 1 inch or 2 inches wide, or high as the case may be. Now that large stone that I just put in is not quite 2 inches. In fact, it's off by quite a bit.
So let's go ahead.
That's not that big of a deal. I'm going to get that upper stone back to level just by shimming it ever so slightly, and I'll leave that shim in overnight to allow the thin set to properly set up. And this last piece that I put in there on the left side of the corner, thankfully, that's actually a little bit more than 1 inch tall, which really helps to make up the difference as I try to shim the stones to make up for that smaller stone down below. Now I need to shift my focus to the stonework below the mantle, and the first thing I need to do is build a nice hearth around my peninsula fireplace. Now this is a project I've never done before, but like so many do-it-yourself home improvement projects, when you break it down into its individual pieces and parts, it's really not that hard to do. With the stone hearth complete, it's time to finish this job. First thing I need to do is remove the wooden support pieces supporting the first course of stone that I installed many weeks ago. And all that's left is for me to finish out this final corner. Alright folks, well we're just about done. So what I need to do is fill in this area here, which of course incorporates a corner. Now, initially, I read some reviews talking about how poorly made and inaccurate these corners were. So I only ordered 6 because I just wanted to take a look at it, and I measured it with my square, and not any one of them is at 90 degrees really. So to start off, I just built all of my corners out of individual pieces just by stacking the pieces up and building your own corners. But then I thought, let me give the corners a try. Let me see how they'll work. And even though some of them are at about 88, 89 degrees, or maybe as much as 91 degrees, it doesn't really make that much of a difference after you apply the thin set and set the corners in place. In fact, I gave it a shot, and the majority of this wall here is made with the pre-made corners, which quite honestly went a whole lot faster. So my recommendation to you is to go ahead and order the pre-made corners and use them, because it does make the project go a whole lot faster. I'm going to show you how to put this corner on, which is quite simple, and then finish out from the corner to the fireplace and the corner to the wall. For this last little piece, I'll show you how I separate the individual stones and then apply them to the wall to make your own custom corner. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we'll do is set our pre-made corner in place. Now you want to align the edges of the corner to be installed with the previously installed stones. And this is particularly important because we're going to take our measurements to cut our stone panel from the alignment of this dry fit corner. You'll take the long measurement and the short measurement, and we'll transcribe that onto our panel in prep for the cut. Now, regarding the pre-made corners, I found them to be perfectly acceptable for installation on a project. And quite honestly, I wish I had purchased more, because building your corners out of individual stones takes a tremendous amount of time and work to make them look really nice. Now, I really wanted nice, natural looking corners, and that's why I made the decision to not go with using very many of the pre-made corners. But after using them, I found that they look just as nice as the individual corners that I made at a tremendous amount of effort. Now, I'm complete with my dry fit here, and we'll go ahead and back butter these pieces and set them in place. At the completion of this corner build, I'll show you a comparison of this corner, which is made of mostly all pre-made corners, and another corner that's made entirely of individual stones. And you'll see the nice, clean, natural looking appearance of the pre-made corners. Setting that corner in place, giving it a little wiggle to distribute the thin set, and ensuring that my edges, the bottom edges of the pre-made corner, align nicely and naturally with the existing stone below. And then of course setting the back buttered flat panel in place, ensuring that my upper and lower joints where they come together with the pre-made corner are nice and tight. And now it's time to show you how to separate the stones. Of course, you could cut them on the wet saw, but I found that there's a tremendous amount of waste in that you're wasting one row of stone every time you make a cut. So I did a little bit of experimenting. I wasn't sure what type of adhesive this was. And after some trial and error, I found that heat was the best way to soften up the glue that would allow me to snap apart the stones with minimal damage. And as you can see, once you get that glue soft enough, it's not very hard to detach the stones from the panel, and you might have just a little bit of cleanup to do to get the excess adhesive off. Another thing you might find you have to do is true up the edge of the stone just a bit, just to ensure that it fits in nicely with the stones that are wrapping around the corner. And again, to do this, I'm using the stone file, which makes for pretty quick work, and you can get the stone down to any dimension you need. Now, to make that nice natural edge, I'm using a stone cutter. These are available at your local hardware store or tile shop, and it comes with a little diamond edged cutter that really you just use to score a line, and then you use the plier portion of the tile cutter and crack along that score line, and it yields a rough edge that's just a little nicer looking than the smooth edge that you get from the wet saw. And for the stone application that we're doing, you want to have a rough edge as opposed to a polished cut edge. It looks a little bit more natural. Now, you notice here in this corner I've got a little bit of a gap there. Well, that's not as big of a deal as you might think, because throughout the rest of the panels, even the pre-made panels, there's slight gaps here and there, and really that's meant to leave it looking as a natural stacked stone, as opposed to something that's more manufactured and everything fits together perfectly. So after I back butter the stones and I apply them permanently, I'll use some stone flakes as shims to take up the gap in the top by distributing that gap over my 3 rows of stone. The overall effect at the end will be a nice natural looking stacked stone. So applying my stones, and I noticed that the stone on the left is inset just a little bit too far. See that large edge reveal? Simple process of just kicking that stone out on the corner side and the back side just to take up that edge reveal and keep it standard with the rest of the wall. And now I'll just simply apply all the back buttered stones around this corner. With these 3 stones in place, now I have to address that gap at the top. Now, these are just flakes of stone left over from cutting and cracking, and I'm going to use these as my shims. Now, if you have a small gap to close, you put the shim in towards the end of the stone, and the further you move that shim in, the more that raises the stone and closes the gap at the top. So very simply, get a nice natural look, and you can see that that's in line with the other gaps that come naturally in the panels. Alright folks, we are literally at the end of this stone project. with the remaining 5 stones to set in place. Let me say thanks for sticking with me through the whole project. I just have to fine tune this last stone on the wet saw, back butter it, and tap it into place. A little bit of cleanup, and this job is done. And as you can see, this corner, made nearly entirely out of pre-made corners, looks every bit as natural as this corner made entirely out of individual stones. And one final note, when you're installing stone of this type, there is no need to grout after you've completed all of your install. And coming up in just a couple seconds, some viewer pictures of projects that they've completed. Hey, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am more than happy to help. Now make no mistake about it, this was a big project, but with the right time, tools, and patience, you can have some pretty spectacular results. Okay, first up on some of the projects sent in by Do and Brew viewers, this is Jim's TV nook that he and his wife completed a few months back. Really like that box mantel. Really nice work, Jim. And this is Kirby's kitchen. He did a super nice job putting in a stone backsplash in his kitchen, and really great work on this corner, this inside corner. Look how tight that is. That's about as tight as you get. Great job, Kirby. And finally, this is Gidget's Kitchen in Ohio. She and her husband bought a fixer-upper, and they recently completed a kitchen remodel to include some beautiful dark stone for their backsplash, which is really set off nicely by their under cabinet lighting. Great work on those projects, folks, and thanks a lot for sending them in. And as promised, here are the links to the box mantle and hearth projects. Hey, good luck on all your projects, folks. See you back here next time on Do and Brew. Take care.